Welcome to the Explainer. Today, we're going to tackle a really frustrating paradox in the world of coatings. How can an ingredient that's designed to help you be the very thing that causes your entire project to fail? Let's get into it. Okay, so let's dive right in with the big question. You know the drill. You add a dispersant which is supposed to be a helper, right? But instead of a perfect finish, you get peeling, you get cracking, a total loss of adhesion. It's maddening. So how can something so helpful go so wrong? So to really get our heads around this, we need to frame the problem. We're going to call it the dispersant paradox. And it's a classic case, really, of too much of a good thing turning bad. I mean, look at this. On one hand, dispersants are your absolute best friend in a formulation. They get in there, they wet the pigments, break up all those annoying clumps, and keep the whole mixture nice and stable. But, on the other hand, if you add just a little too much, that same ingredient turns into the villain of the story. It starts creating weak points, killing your adhesion, and just wrecking the durability of your coating. All right, so to figure out where things are going off the rails, we've got to go back to basics. We need to understand how dispersants are supposed to work. You have to understand the tool before you can figure out why it's breaking. What's so cool here is how these three jobs work together like a well-oiled machine. First, you've got wetting. Think of it like paving a road so the resin can actually get to the pigment particles. Then comes dispersing. That's the heavy machinery, the brute force that breaks up all the pigment traffic jams. And finally, stabilizing. That's like the traffic cop, making sure all those particles stay in their own lanes and don't clump back together. So how does it do all that? Well, the secret is in its two-part structure. It's brilliant, really. You have the anchor group, which locks onto the pigment surface like a powerful magnet. And then you have these solvated chains, which act like protective bumpers, sticking out into the resin and physically keeping all the other pigments at a safe distance. And this chart, wow, this just says it all, doesn't it? It shows the dosage dilemma perfectly. On the left, if you use too little dispersant, your pigments are all clumpy and your coating is weak. Then you hit that middle bar, the sweet spot, the optimal amount, and your coating strength is at its absolute peak. But look what happens when you push past that point. The strength just plummets. That's the danger zone, right there. That's where the failure begins. So what in the world is happening on the right side of that chart? Why does more of a supposedly good thing cause such a catastrophic failure? Well, let's put on our detective hats. We're going to investigate the 3 key ways this helper ingredient turns into a saboteur. Okay, culprit number 1. It's basically a microscopic battle royale, a phenomenon we call competitive adsorption. This quote just hits the nail on the head. The surface of every pigment particle only has so many spots where a molecule can attach. So when you have too much dispersant in the mix, these small, fast-moving dispersant molecules just flood the zone and steal all the available seats before the bigger, more important resin molecules can even find a spot. And this little game of musical chairs has some really serious consequences. First, you get physical isolation. The dispersant literally builds a wall between the resin and the pigment. Second, you get a chemical downgrade. The strong structural bonds that the resin is supposed to form are replaced by flimsy, weak ones from the dispersant. And all this leads to internal weakening, turning your pigments from reinforcement pillars into mushy soft spots. Now for the second mechanism. And this one is sneaky. It involves a hidden, fragile layer that forms at the most critical place of all, right where your coating is supposed to stick to the surface. It's called the weak boundary layer, or WBL. It's this thin film of nothing but excess, unbound dispersant that gathers right at the bottom of your coating. Now here's the kicker, the thing you have to understand. When your coating peels off, it's often not the actual coating failing. No, it's this invisible, incredibly weak layer that's actually breaking apart. So how does this sneaky layer even form? Well, it's a double whammy. First, it's a race to the bottom. The little dispersant molecules are like tiny race cars, and they easily speed past the big, slow-moving resin molecules to get to the substrate first. Second, it's basic physics. The whole system is actually more stable. It's at a lower energy state by pushing this junk to the bottom. The end result? A perfect barrier that stops the resin from ever making contact and doing its job. And finally, our third mechanism of failure. This one doesn't happen at the edges or the bottom. This is an attack from within, happening throughout the main body, the bulk of the coating itself. It's an inside job. All that extra free-floating dispersant has to go somewhere, right? It ends up causing chaos in 2 different ways. First, it acts as a plasticizer. It worms its way in between the resin chains, pushing them apart and making the whole film softer, less tough. And second, it causes chemical interference. It physically gets in the way of the curing agent, preventing the resin from linking up and forming that strong, durable network it's supposed to. And the ultimate result of all that interference? It's simple, and it's absolutely devastating. A major decrease in the coating's cross-link density. And look, a lower cross-link density isn't just some abstract lab term. It has real, tangible consequences. It means your coating has lower hardness, so it's going to scratch easily. It'll have terrible resistance to chemicals and solvents. And maybe worst of all, it's going to absorb more water, which leads directly to blistering and failure.
Okay, that was a lot of doom and gloom, I know. We've basically run a full forensic analysis on this coating failure. But now, for the good part. Let's get to the masterclass. How do we use all this knowledge to actually formulate for success and avoid this whole mess?
First things first, you have to realize that not all dispersants are created equal. Not by a long shot. As you can see here, you want to pick a dispersant with a low-risk profile. That means a higher molecular weight, a more complex branched structure. Why? Because those bigger, clunkier molecules are way less mobile. They're slow. And that makes them far, far less likely to win that race to the bottom and form that dreaded weak boundary layer. But hey, picking the right molecule is only half the battle. Success really comes down to process control. 3 key things. 1, do the lab work to find the exact saturation point, just enough to do the job and not 1 drop more. 2, strictly control any excess. And 3, and this is a big one, optimize your order of addition. Let the dispersant get on the pigment and do its job first, before the resin even enters the picture. No more musical chairs. So, at the end of the day, it all boils down to this. By understanding these failure mechanisms, the competitive adsorption, that sneaky weak boundary layer, the bulk degradation, you can take back control. You can design your formulation so that your dispersant is always a helpful partner. Which leaves us with one last question for you to think about. In your next formulation, is your dispersant going to be a true partner or an unwitting competitor?